This is the Small Town Big Talk Show, the only place where you can listen in on real life conversations about the challenges and the joys of living in a small town. I'm your host, Rebecca Undum, and each week a guest will join me as we tackle one topic that more than likely we're all feeling or have thought about, but of course, no one wants to talk about. Let's chat. My guest on today's episode is Megan Laudenschlager. She is the founder and executive director of Strengthen ND, a nonprofit social enterprise founded in 2015. You're going to hear this in this episode. The reason I wanted to bring Megan on is that I was recently connected with her, and she literally is just on fire for small towns. In particular, she's a huge advocate for rural North Dakota. She loves our home state, and that's what we're chatting about today. She gets involved in community fundraising. She's a rural organizer, and she's really just a small town advocate all the way around. Today, we're talking about how to be proud of where you come from. It's something that I told her I struggled with. When I first moved back, I had those little glimmers of shame and just kind of embarrassment maybe, not of my small town, but of what I felt like it meant or said about me. And that has since totally changed. And Megan is going to inspire you to think differently about how you speak about your small town too. All right, Megan, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you on.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, when I first met you, I remember just thinking like this girl is somebody I was just so thrilled. Like you gave me an entire page of notes. I asked you, we were just talking generally about some things, and I had just a page of stuff. So you are a wealth of information. So obviously you're very smart, but it's really your heart and your passion that I'm super excited to have showcased today on this episode. So we're really talking today about, we were talking a little bit ago about just why and how maybe it's so hard sometimes to not feel embarrassed or shameful living in a small town. Mm-hmm. And you feel really strongly about this. We both do. We were just talking about it. And the idea of being proud of where you come from, being proud of your roots. So you shared a couple things with me that I think are awesome. So I'll just, with that, what do you think about all of this? What have you personally experienced as you travel, being an advocate for North Dakota, an advocate for rural North Dakota specifically? What have you experienced that kind of shapes your feeling about having that pride in where you're from?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things that goes along with it. Really being proud of where I've come from and being proud of the state of North Dakota and its amazing people is what really led to the creation of Strengthen ND. So I get to demonstrate that passion and that love for North Dakota every day in the work that I do. And I can remember being in high school, preparing for college, and having teachers and people in the community say, okay, you're doing well, now get out of here, get out of North Dakota. There's so much other opportunity available for you. And I tried. I lived in a couple of different places. I lived in Rochester, Minnesota. I lived in Bozeman, Montana, but there was just nothing that felt as good or felt as right for me other than living in North Dakota. So it's one of those things where I've always been pulled back here. And I think people don't understand truly how wonderful our state is. Because they haven't been here, they haven't experienced it, and we as North Dakotans haven't talked up our state or been vocal about all the great people and great things we have going on in our state.
Right. So by the way, I wear this all the time. It's actually North Dakota. I don't know if you noticed.
Oh, I didn't.
So it's my little, like, I'm always like Nodak pride here. Okay. So a couple things you talked about. Let's go back to, because this is something I just told you when you first said to me this whole thing about we invest small towns, and I said it to you too, right, when we're talking about some other things with community development. Mm-hmm. We as small communities, we invest in our schools. Mm-hmm. We invest in our students, but ultimately we're investing in them and then encouraging them to leave. Mm-hmm. So, and I told you that I actually shared that with the Dollar General employee that was talking to me this morning. We talked about that. So when you think about that, what can we do differently, do you think, as communities to maybe frame it differently? Like I get, like Oaks, North Dakota, it doesn't have a college in it. So, if kids are going to go off and get that education outside or post-secondary, they're going to need to leave.
Right.
But what do you think we could do differently in terms of how we talk to them about the opportunities available to return?
I think the first piece we need to do is reframe the way that we look at living in a small town. So sometimes we say, we're out in the middle of nowhere. Well, maybe we need to reframe that and say, we're located in the middle of everywhere, right? So Oaks, we are a 4.5, 5-hour drive from the Twin Cities. You're 6 or 7 hours maybe away from Black Hills. We have these great assets here, and you're just a little over an hour away from Fargo. So you can take advantage of that rural community living and still have access to those more urban areas in just a couple of hours. So you can really have the best of both worlds by living in a small town in North Dakota. And I think we just need to frame that out a little bit differently when we talk to people living in our communities, when we talk to people outside of our communities, that you may think that we live in the middle of nowhere, but really we live in the middle of everywhere. Secondly, when it comes to the types of jobs and opportunities that our youth can go after, because we have access to high-speed internet in North Dakota, we're one of the best connected in that respect. The whole world can really come to you. So you can take college classes online, you can start an online business, you can work remotely and still live in your small town. So I think we just need to leave the traditional thought behind a brick and mortar business or a specific type of job and say, we can offer you really everything that you need right here in this community. You might just get it in a different way, but we can still offer it to you.
Right. Yeah, so that's something I don't think that North Dakota, I don't think the residents of North Dakota, I don't know that we realize how fortunate we are with our internet situation. There was an article, I don't even remember the source of the article, but I came across my news feed in Facebook and I shared it, and it just said, it was like, hey, anybody that's a freelancer or wants to do their own thing, like, this is where it's at, because we've got fantastic internet, which is really cool. And I think what you're reminding me about too, and it's partly what I like to talk to women about in particular, like when I go and speak in small towns, it's just like, if you have an idea for something that you want to create or do, there is almost no limit to your ability to start that. Even if you're in the middle of everywhere, which, by the way, I love that. And I've never said that. And I'm going to start, promise, like Scout's honor, I'm going to start saying that, because I think that's great. Because I do often say, like, we're really isolated and we're in the middle of nowhere here in Oaks, right? Because to me, proximity is all about how close are you to a target. We're 71.2 miles from Target, approximately, Megan. But again, it's not, none of that is actually that far.
No, and I go and visit my parents in Arizona, and when we've gone to visit them, we look at the map and we say, okay, well, maybe, I know one time we wanted to go on these this indoor go-kart thing. I can't remember exactly what it was called. And on the map, it wasn't very far away. But with traffic, it was almost 2 hours away. So you're going to be in a car whether you live in a big urban setting or whether you live in a rural setting. At least in that rural setting, you have the beauty of the landscape instead of just all of these other cars surrounding you that makes it a stressful situation. I mean, even when I visit the cities, which is, becoming more and more common, you have that immediate walkability downtown, which is great and fantastic. But still, you have to put up with traffic. You still have to get in your car to drive somewhere. I mean, so what's the difference between jumping in your car at Oaks and heading over to Jamestown or heading up to Fargo? It's just all about the way that you view it. And it's that old saying, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's drawbacks either way that you look at it, but I think what we're able to offer people who choose to stay or come back or just move to our rural communities is really that sense of community. And I think that that's something that you don't necessarily get in an urban setting, where really in rural North Dakota, you know your neighbors, you have access to your mayor, your city councilman, your state representative super easily. So if you wanted to take on a new initiative, if there's something that you wanted to advocate for or fight for, you have that easy access. It's not like where it's limited in a more urban setting, or even where you have to navigate additional bureaucracy.
Right.
You can really take on something and start making a difference right now.
Right. And I think, you know, so I've lived in a bigger city. You've lived in a bigger communities, obviously, than where you're at now. Sometimes I miss anonymity. I miss that sometimes, you know, because honestly, you know, you can't get that in a small town. You know, you go to your grocery store, you are going to run into somebody, you know, there, besides all the people that work there, you know. So, but I, you know, I was talking to my girlfriend, Britt, we were talking about this. I get to experience that when I travel. And I've gotten better and better at realizing that I don't actually need it all the time.
No, you know there's
something,
I mean? Yeah, well, there's something to be said about going into the store and seeing somebody, you know, going out to eat and running into friends, where you feel that sense of community too. So I totally understand the desire to be anonymous, because sometimes I just want to throw on a hat and sweatpants and go to the grocery store and not see anybody.
Right.
But that doesn't happen. Sometimes you have to hide in the aisles,
right?
Because you don't want somebody to see you haven't showered yet today.
Exactly. Or you just look at them and say, "This is my Saturday grocery shopping look," like, you know. But yeah, I totally get it, and it's funny because, I mean, realistically, I used to struggle with it a lot more. You know, when we first moved back here, it was just kind of that downshift of the slower pace of life. All of the things that I like the hustle and I like the exhilaration. And so I missed that a lot when we first moved back. But now, so I think about the fact that, again, I work from home, right? Like, this is my office. I'm in my house. I need to run into people when I'm running errands that I know, because that gives me the connection that I'd be missing otherwise. I think if I were working from home, from a home office in a bigger city, I think the loneliness would actually be worse.
Yeah. And I love that in communities, just the ability to connect with so many different people and to have it come more organically. So one thing that I really struggle with is going to networking events. I hate it, because it's a lot. I'm an introvert, so it's a lot of energy for me to be out there and to put my hand out and meet somebody new. But in a small town, when you're running into them at the grocery store, when you are running into them when you drop your kid off at school or whatever it might be, those connections happen more organically, and they can be just stronger and more worthwhile in terms of their value to you personally, and also their value to you professionally. You know, because when you work with people, or in the nonprofit sector, when we fundraise, we always have to remind organizations that people give to people. So you have to be out and you have to be visible, and you have to have those connections within the community to ensure that the mission of your organization remains viable.
Right. And I think it feels less forced, because it is less forced. You know, there's not, again, the organic nature of how community happens. It's not because you're all there with some sort of goal, you know. Right. It's just, and I'm not a huge fan of networking events either. And I'm about as extroverted as they come. And I still just, because it all feels very artificial, you know, there's something,
right.
The connection is missing. You know, you're trying to build connection, but that doesn't happen just with a quick handshake and an exchange of business cards. It takes time. Right.
And I think growing up in, you know, small communities, I'm very suspicious of people at those types of events, where I think, what do you want from me? I know you want something from me. what do you want from me? Let's get it out of the way so I get my favor bank back at zero, you know?
Right. For sure. I totally get that. So the other thing that we talked about kind of before we started recording the episode was a little bit, it reminded me a little bit reminiscent of my episode with Ashley, just talking about what it really means. So with her, she's like literally cheerleading. We talked about, she's literally going outside and saying, you should take a look at my small town. What is advocating for either your small town or your state, in your case, because you travel out of state quite a bit? What does that feel like for you? What are the challenges with it? I mean, what would you recommend to the woman that's going to be, or man that might be watching this, and maybe they struggle a little bit sometimes with how they frame up what their community is like? What does advocacy really look like to you?
Well, advocacy internally within the state is being proud of your community and being proud of all the things that the community does. I mean, we look at some initiatives that happen, in communities. So for example, in Minot, we have 8 soup kitchens that operate weekly. So that means that people who are in need have at least one meal that they can get every day. And that's just something that we do. It's just a part of who this community is. So we don't necessarily think it's a big deal. But when we look at other communities, right, or when people are looking in, it is a big deal. So we need to, number one, recognize the assets that we have in our community. And those assets come in the form of people. It comes in the form of culture. It comes in the form of past projects that have just been really cool or really great. I mean, there's an effort that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, or I guess I'll name a couple of efforts. One of them is Community of Care out of Arthur, which is supporting seniors to age in place, which does a lot of really, really great work. And another one being, Nelson County Arts Council, that has the biggest arts show in the entire state over in Pekin. And Pekin is a tiny, tiny town. It's a lovely town. It's a very small town. So we have all of these great things going on in rural communities that other people outside of the state would look in and say that we're very innovative, right? Well, right. Innovation is just something that we do. Innovation is all about using your assets or your resources in a different way to meet community needs. We've been doing that for hundreds of years. It's just who we are as North Dakotans. So recognizing that we really are a great place to live. We have experts here in our communities. We are doing a good job with specific things. That's number one for advocating within your own state. And two, when we go out of state, it can be very easy to fall into this role of thinking, okay, well, I'm from a small state. We have this particular stereotype or particular stigma. I'm just going to kind of be that wallflower, or maybe not try to correct people when they highlight those stereotypes or highlight those misnomers. And for a number of years, I would kind of go out of state to different events and feel like, okay, I got to put my armor on. I got to be ready to go when they start saying negative things about where I'm from. And at first, I wouldn't combat that enough. I would just kind of say, yep, I live in the middle of nowhere. I'm from North Dakota.
The weather is terrible.
The weather is terrible. Yes, we have internet. You know what I mean? Just kind of some of those geographic bullying types of things.
Right. Well, it's ignorance. Don't you think it comes from a place of ignorance? They don't know.
Totally. And now it's gotten more where I feel comfortable saying, that's really not what it's like to live here. We have all of these great things. And because of the work I'm able to do, I'm blessed to be able to understand and to know great people who are doing great things. So I have tangible examples where I can say, well, you know how we're innovative in this way. You know how we come together and care about people? We care about people in this way. I mean, if you look at North Dakota, we're probably one of the most quickly responsive when it comes to issues or disasters or tragedies that happen within our community. I mean, I look at the community of Minot, and I moved here in 2010, right before the flood happened. And in
That was
2011,
devastating for your community.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And over 11,000 people were displaced. And there were, I think, less than 30 people that ended up going to a temporary shelter. So they closed down the shelter because the community members just said, okay, come stay with us, come live with us. So we have to remember that even though there might be negative issues in the news, and a lot of it is coming through political interactions or things like that,
right?
That's not who we are. We have to remember who we are as a community within North Dakota, but also just as the community of North Dakota. We really are that small town with just really big blocks. And we're a great place to live and to work.
Right. So it reminds me, so we have the James River, the Jim River, in the river valley here. And just a little bit north of us is a small town called Lemoore. And we just there's some now notices that they're already dealing with some flooding issues. And I mean, already, like you said, the response of people, it's immediate. My aunt and uncle lost their home eventually after the second flooding in Fargo on the Red River. Yeah, I mean, the way that people come together, it really is spectacular. And I think that is, these are the things, I'm so thankful to have you on, because I think these are the things, not just for North Dakotans, but it's for everybody anywhere, thinking about what is it that my community has to offer? What are our assets? And then trying to think through tangible examples of what are moments that I've seen where we are progressive, where we're not stuck. Because I mean, one of the things that I think can kill a spirit of somebody with some desire to bring changes about is the phrase, we've always done it this way.
Right.
You know, and yeah, there's some of that mindset. But I really am trying to I'm trying to remind myself, first of all, and then encourage everybody I work with to remember that we stand on the shoulders of the people that came before us. So those folks that maybe aren't super open to change, it's because they fought really hard to get to where we are now. And they are a little afraid sometimes that our new ideas, whatever those ideas might be, and whatever even kind of sector we're speaking about, they're worried. And they're afraid, you know? But a lot of times I think we forget to really honor the history of what's come before us, right? We just want to make the future better. But that always tends to imply that what we've got right now, what all these people built, isn't quite good enough.
Exactly.
What have you experienced with that? Because I know you've experienced that when you're working with these rural communities.
Yeah. I think for us, one of our organizational values is meeting people where they are. And that's meeting people where they are in terms of skill set or capacity or resources or even what their viewpoints are. And a lot of that's been informed by our work with national art strategies around systems change, and understanding that, you know, on the spectrum, we might be over here, but we can't leave these people over here behind. So we have to think about meeting people where they are. And a lot of that is around relationship building and communicating what type of positive change it is that you're trying to make, why you're trying to make it. And then for the people who might be naysayers or who are saying that, you know, we've always done it this way, communicating to them why that change would be valuable to them. And I think that's the beautiful part about living in a small town, is that you know who those people are. You can go ask them for coffee. You can ask them why it is that they fear this change or whatever that might be. And we always have to remember, I think Brene Brown has a quote about it, that people make decisions always out of fear or out of love. So just remembering that when somebody is pushing back on your idea or pushing back on quote unquote progress, that it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with you. It's about either their fear or what it is that they're feeling internally. And we, as that person who is helping to lead change, we have to be understanding. And there's a great book called Leadership on the Line, I think it's by Marty Linsky. And he talks about whenever you're pushing for change in in community or in organization or in a particular group, you always have to take a moment to stand up on the balcony and look at what's going on within the group or the dynamics within your community from a completely outsider perspective, to understand maybe if people aren't getting on board with your vision, it might have been something that you did. You didn't inform them enough ahead of time. You're not communicating the right message. So it's a great way to think about how we meet people where they are and understand that change takes so long, and we have to be thoughtful about working with each person where they are to make that change happen.
It's almost like take a naysayer to lunch.
Exactly. Well, and you can't ignore them. I know sometimes people say, well, just ignore what they say.
Oh,
and if they're spouting off asinine comments, yeah. I mean, there are just going to be some of those you just got to brush it off. But if they're bringing up legitimate, reasonable, or if they're a very reasonable person, you have to hear them out, because there might be something that you're completely missing because you're so excited about what it is that you're going to do.
Right. Well, and I think I whenever I'm in a situation like this, because I feel like I find myself in those situations where I'm really jacked up and fired up about some idea, like I think it's perfect and I think it's great, and then you don't get the response you want right away, and it can be really easy to take. It is hard not to take it personally and feel like it's about you. But ultimately, all I try to do is say, what can I learn about where this person's coming from? And so just try to put on the perspective of curiosity, and so if you do take them to lunch or you take them to coffee or you sit down with them and you just ask them questions, try to understand where they're coming from. And it's not easy, because even once you know where they're coming from, you still might vehemently disagree with the position that they have. I mean, that's a very plausible outcome,
Yep.
But at least you're taking the effort, because people matter.
Yes.
And we can't get anything to happen. We will gain no traction by steamrolling everybody.
Exactly. And it's okay if people disagree with you, and that's okay. It's okay for you to disagree with them.
Right.
I always am more suspicious of the people who jump on board with my idea right away than the people who push back on it.
Right.
Because I think, well, why are you jumping on board?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you want? Which sounds like a very paranoid, this coupled with my comment about networking and what do you want from me, sounds like I'm a very paranoid person. And I probably am. But it's about understanding the water that you're swimming in all the time, for me.
Right.
So what's the water that I'm swimming in? Because you have to understand that climate, so you don't, not that you're not ever going to make a misstep, but you have to understand people's intentions and why it is that they are responding in that way, because you have to protect yourself and the integrity of whatever that project is.
Right. I think that's so valuable. Okay, so overall, when it comes back to, we'll kind of wrap up the whole topic of just being proud of where you came from. What if there was one thing that you would impart to the women or men, mostly women, watch the talk show, that you would impart to them about how to get a better sense of pride, whether it's internally, externally? What's one thing that they could do, like right now in their small towns, to get a better handle on that, just how to show up with that sense of pride?
One thing that they can do, and it's going to sound super cheesy, but practicing that attitude of gratitude on saying, you know what, we have a grocery store here, or we have a farmer's market here. Isn't that great? Because not all communities have that. Or we have this great community building where people get to come together and play bingo or roller skates. Isn't that great that we have that? Instead of always thinking about, well, I wish we had a Panera, I wish we had a Target, or I wish we had, ABCD, whatever it is. Because if we truly appreciate all that our community has to offer, we can start to build that community spirit, and then maybe you can get some of those added things that are on your wish list. But there's that whole idea around bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
That I think is so important, that if you don't embrace what it is where you're living right now or what you have right now, you're never going to be happy, right? It's like, and it's that whole grass is always greener piece. So it's just all about appreciating what it is that you have.
I love that. You've actually managed to bring in two of kind of my main thematic ideas. I talk a lot about looking over the fence. You look over the fence and you look at all the stuff that's over there. Well, it's greener, but it's not yours and it's not real. So the only thing that you can do anything about is what's real, what's like right under your feet. So I love the kind of the challenge just to go out and look at your community with a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, drive end to end in your community and look around and pay attention to the cool things that are there, because they're there. We just have to look for them.
And if there's something that you after you take your inventory and you look at all the things that you have, and if there's something you're really passionate about, get off your butt and do it.
Amen.
If you want a summer concert series in your community, start working on it. If you want an art gallery, if you want a coffee shop, get out and do it, because everybody is limited on time, everybody's limited on capacity, everybody's limited on passion, and communities thrive when people take ownership, when they take accountability, and when they have that space or that freedom to feel like they can go out and make that difference.
Right. And everybody can.
Yeah.
Every single one of us has the ability. I mean, it really is possible. I think sometimes that sounds really cheesy and cliche too. I hate cliche statements, but sometimes the simple things that we've heard over and over, they become cliche because we forget that they actually hold power.
Well, and I'm gonna double down on the cheesiness right now.
Do it.
Because sometimes we look at people in communities and we say, okay, well, they're the community leader, they can do it. And we have to remember that leadership is not an occupation. Leadership is not a job title. Leadership is something that you do. So you can exercise leadership when you're sitting down with your family at the kitchen table, when you are checking people out at Dollar General, when you are running a city council meeting, or whatever that might be, that there's no special power that leaders have. Everybody can exercise leadership. So I don't necessarily, I cringe sometimes when people say, well, let's pull in the community leaders. Let's pull in the community doers. I don't want people necessarily in authority who are just in authority but maybe aren't the doers. Give me the community doers, and I'll get on board the people in specific positions that I need to move it forward. But I need the community doers, and most often those doers are women. And we sell ourselves short because we don't see that we're exercising leadership by being those doers, but we totally are all the time. And we cut ourselves off at the knee because we don't value what it is that we bring to the table by being those doers.
Oh my word. Amen. So I just talked about this. It was 2 episodes ago, like, quit minimizing your skills, quit minimizing the value of your skills. So thinking about women, and I love that you just like called it right out, because I've said this before too, women are community builders. We're the ones that are, and especially if you are a mother and you're raising children, you're very integrated into many facets of the community.
Right.
And the very fact that you're able to manage a household and have other responsibilities and be on committees and be on boards, those skills are translatable or transferable to projects, to business. We minimize them because we think, well, I'm just a homemaker, or I'm just a mom that's home. No, you're not just anything. Like, it takes serious skills to stay on top of all of that. I always joke, I'm like, that's project management. Cool. You're a project manager. And it's crazy because it's so hard not to say, well, but I just do this or I just do that. No.
Or we minimize ourselves in thinking that we don't have that right type of experience. So where you talked about, that's project management. I think that we don't run for women, don't run for office because we think, well, we don't know how to do that, or we don't have the experience to be able to do that. I can tell you that a homemaker probably has more skills in balancing budgets, in building coalitions, in negotiations, in taking care of vulnerable people than some folks down at our legislature right now. I would say a lot of folks down at our legislature right now. Right. Just because you haven't demonstrated those skills in a boardroom does not mean that they don't exist, does not mean that you're not good at them. And it's important to, I've been on this big David Foster Wallace kick. So back in the early 2000s, David Foster Wallace gave this commencement speech, and it's a really good speech about how we show up. So we talked about how we show up for our communities and for our state and being an advocate for them, but it's how do we show up in everyday life where we're exercising leadership. So his speech, it was to Kenyon Community College, I think is back in the early 2000s, where he talks about understanding the water that we live in, right? So he starts off the speech saying, you know, two fish were swimming in the sea, and another fish swims by him and says, hey guys, how's the water? And the other two fish don't say anything. And then a few minutes later, one fish turns to the other fish and says, what the hell is water? So it's understanding that the water that he's talking about is your everyday situations where you don't default to thinking that you're the center of the universe. So that person cut me off in traffic because they, kind of victimizing yourself. Or that person that checked me out at the Dollar General was rude to me. So it's understanding that people have so much else going on in their lives that you are the reason, that you're not the center of the world, and the way that you react and the way that you react internally and show up internally really is a great way to demonstrate leadership. And that, again, you're not the center of the world. Everybody else has so much going on other than you, that it's not about you.
Right. That's great. I think that's a great way to end. I'm going to have to reference that because I've never watched it or read it. Can you see it, actually see it on YouTube, or is it something just to read?
It's on YouTube. There's no video with it. It's just the audio, but there's a picture on there. But I think sometimes when we're doing community work, we tend to make ourselves into the victim of, they just don't like my idea. It's because it's a personal thing, when really there's so much going on below the surface that you don't even know about.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Megan.
Well, thank you for having me.
So much fun to have you here. And so we will get links to your website so people can check out all the good work that you and your team are doing over at Strengthen ND. Thank you so much for being an advocate for North Dakota. I can't imagine a better one.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you for all that you do for rural women. It's amazing work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. So you're a transplant, living in a small town that wasn't originally yours, and you are constantly reminded that you are not one of them. And you're wondering when you're going to stop feeling like an outsider. Grab your copy of the Small Town Survival Kit. It was designed just for you as a transplant, and it will help you feel less lonely, less isolated, and a little bit more inspired while you're waiting for the acceptance of who you are as a person to come around.